Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, our tough and streetwise and intellectual gang members are Borek Volarik, a Czech defector, as well as a canceled Czech. Ari David, the podcast host of the brilliant Ari David show. And Basil Hoffman, a prolific actor who starred in many films, including 2 Academy Award-winning Best Pictures, Ordinary People and The Artist. Welcome, gentlemen, to the Glazov Gang.
Thanks for having us.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are each of you to be on the Glazov Gang? Borek?
15.
Okay. Ari?
25.
Excellent. Basil?
A high 10.
Excellent. Now, gentlemen, there's a few in-house matters we have to take care of before we start our intellectual discussion. You are already a member. I don't mean to scare you, Ari and Basil, but we have a rule on the Glazov Gang. Do you know what it is?
I do not.
Okay. Borek, tell them.
When you need to visit little boy's room, raise your hand.
No. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Hotel California? Okay, so I don't mean to scare you, but that's the rule of the Glazov Gang. You can check in, you can check out, but you can never leave. That's the rule about the Glazov Gang, okay?
Makes sense.
Sounds good to me.
Is everybody okay with that?
Makes sense.
Okay.
So it's like the mafia.
Exactly.
Got it.
Now, we're becoming a little bit more multicultural as well on the Glazov Gang, and we're adding more languages and expanding our audience very quickly. Does anybody here speak another language? Basil?
I have to confess something to you, and I didn't want to do this, Jamie, but I'm going to do it. My father emigrated to the United States from Canada, but he would never allow us to speak Canadian in the home, so I speak English very well.
So you don't say A at the end of your sentences?
That is correct.
And how do you say about? Can you say it?
About.
About. Okay. And Ari,
Yes.
any other languages that you can
No.
speak? Okay. Borek?
Well, I speak Czech, my native, but I also speak Californian, which is Spanish. Should I say something in Spanish?
Yes, very quickly.
Okay. Yo soy de Checoslovaquia. ¿Sí? Mi esposa es de Checoslovaquia también. Y ella es una mujer checoslovaca. Pero yo soy un hombre, ¿sí? Yo no soy checoslovaco. Yo soy hombre, yo soy checoslotorro. Mujer checoslovaca, hombre checoslotorro. Una pareja, ¿sí?
Excellent. We're gaining a huge international audience. Gentlemen, now let's turn to the serious discussion of the Glazov Gang. I want to begin with a little bit of a spotlight on each of you, because each of you has a very profound intellectual and spiritual political journey. I think it could be said that on one level you come from, one could say, the belly of the beast, or a hell in some ways in terms of political ideology, whether it was voluntary or involuntary. Basil, let us begin with you. You were once a member, could say, of the political faith in terms of the left.
Oh, yeah.
And tell us a little bit about your membership in the left and your journey out of it.
Well, I was a member of the left because much of my family is very leftist. Northeast, millionaire, Jewish communists, I would say. In my home, we were not very political. My mother was not very political, and my father was Canadian, and he couldn't vote, and we never talked politics in the home. But I seemed to grow up, and I went to a university in the United States, which made me exposed to liberal thought. And from then on, I was liberal. I always voted Democrat, and I never thought why. I just knew I was supposed to, and Republican was a dirty word. Very difficult to say Republican or even think of being Republican. And it was Bill Clinton's second term that, or I guess the middle of his first term, when I started to turn. And I was very good friends with a man named Henry Salvatore, who had been Ronald Reagan's kitchen cabinet member. He was the guy who talked Reagan into running for governor of California, very wealthy guy, very conservative. So between him and Rush Limbaugh and other people, after I had started to doubt this liberalism, and when the Democrat Party stood by Bill Clinton in his secret sex affair, and they said it was just about sex, not realizing that the President of the United States was endangering national security by having an affair. I started to wonder about the party that I had allegiance to, and I became a Republican. And shortly after that, I had a healing. I had been an atheist, and I had a healing, and it happened about the same time. I had a tremor in my right hand, and my wife, who had been a student of Christian Science, talked me into going to a Christian Science practitioner because doctors couldn't help it, and I was healed in 20 minutes. And so I started reading the Bible and Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. And I became pretty Christian. And then I realized that I was really a Messianic Jew. So I have been a Messianic Jew and a Republican, a conservative more than Republican actually, since the early 1990s.
This is quite a story, and I think that when, I don't want to speak for you, but it didn't take 9/11, because for a lot of leftists it was the 9/11 moment.
Yeah.
But when you saw the left's behavior after 9/11, I think a lot of your doubts were confirmed.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then I became publicly conservative, and I don't just been privately conservative until the Hugh Hewitt show.
Basil, were you demonized and dehumanized by the leftist community when you made this change? Was it hard for you?
No, I've lost a friend or two, but mostly I work in this industry, and a lot of liberals hire me. They know my politics because I'm all over the place as a conservative. I'm all over the internet as a conservative.
And you didn't suffer a sort of persecution?
Not that I know of.
Not that you know of. Ari, why don't you tell us your story?
Well, I was born in a small communist country called Santa Monica originally. And I grew up, as Andrew Breitbart would say, as a default leftist or a default liberal. But I didn't know the extent that default extended left. I know that's kind of a redundancy, until I was almost 23 years old. And what happened was, as my cultural immersion in leftist ideology increased, through film, television, the friends around me, all the activities that people do growing up in West LA, I was creeping farther and farther away from classic liberalism and towards a dangerous version of some leftism. And I wasn't even aware of it until one night my best friend was having a birthday party, and his father took him and a whole bunch of his friends, including me, out to dinner at the restaurant Dantana's in West Hollywood. And I was the one in the group who was always railing about politics, spouting off, saying what I would classify today as absolutely moronic stuff. And so I'm sitting next to his father, who owned a business and was a conservative Republican, and I'm jawing and talking his ear off about how Bush is worse than Hitler, and Reagan was worse than Hitler before him, and that Caspar Weinberger is worse than Hitler, and every Republican on planet Earth is worse than Hitler, and Hitler's worse than Hitler. If Hitler was a Republican, that kind of stuff. It made perfect sense at the time. I was very high. I was smoking pot all day long, and I'm sure that was having an effect. So anyway, my best friend's dad turns to me and says, "Ari, I just want to know something." I said, "Sure, Mr. Goodman, what do you want to know?" He says, "If you had the power to impose an economic system on everyone in the country, what it would look like?" Well, I had been thinking about this for a long time, developing my leftist bona fides, and I spouted off the perfect answer, so I said, "Mr. Goodman, what I would do is I will get rid of all money, all possessions. The government will issue everyone a 10 by 10 plot of fertile land where they can grow their own marijuana and organic vegetables." My friend's father looked at me for a second, and he said, "Do you know what you are?" And I go, "No, sir, what?" He says, "You are a communist." And I said to him, "I am not a communist. I just don't want anyone to own anything." And he kind of put his head in his hair, shook his head. Now, fast forward to 3 years later. I'm on lunch break from one of my first jobs as like a 22, 23-year-old. The dinner took place when I was like 18 and a half, 19. So now as a 23-year-old, I'm at my lunch break, and I'm in my car. I'm listening to Dennis Prager. He happens to be on the radio because the person I'm in the car puts Prager on. Prager defined communism that day. He said it's an ideology that seeks to dominate the world, seeks to eliminate God because the government is God in communist systems, and ownership of all things, including your thoughts, body, possessions, internal organs, is illegal. When he said the possession thing, it suddenly clicked. My friend's dad was right. I was a communist. But it's an interesting thing because it shows you when you're trying to adopt a liberal or convert a liberal, sometimes all you have to do is plant a seed and it'll germinate on its own sometimes years later.
And you didn't want to be a communist.
I did not want to be a communist. I thought a communist was worse than Hitler.
Okay, and so you came out of that, began your journey out of the leftist faith.
Yeah.
Borek, now you're from Czechoslovakia, so you didn't really have a choice to join one faith or another, but perhaps there was a certain belief inside. Tell us a bit about your intellectual journey and also how you got to the West.
Actually, I was born in then communist Czechoslovakia, in a communist family. And I was properly indoctrinated at school, like any other kid, you know. But when I reached the teenage age and I started thinking about things, I started getting my doubts. And then I started reading the forbidden literature and books smuggled from the West, from Canada mostly, because there was the Czech publisher house, 68. And started, taking some knowledge and wising up. So actually, at age of 18, I think I was ripe to be a real anti-communist, but not the militant type yet. So when I was eligible for my first elections in my life, I went to the polling station, and there was the box that you would drop the ballots, and there was a screen somewhere in the corner, away everywhere else, so nobody actually went behind that screen. You could adjust the ballots behind the screen. Nobody, because people were afraid that the people at the front desk, the committee would see them. What are they doing behind the screen? Maybe they are adjusting ballots. Oh, what's his name? Okay. Anyway, I went behind the screen. I pulled a big, fat black marker and put big, fat swastika on each of the ballots. And I dropped it in. If they counted it as their vote, fine. Second elections, I actually boycotted, together with my mother, who also wised up. But the communists always got their 99.99% of the votes, but not mine. Then I actually became militant anti-communist when I woke up August 21st, 1968, and there was noise in the streets, and the noise was caused by Russian tanks,
the Prague Spring,
Soviet tanks in our streets.
With Dubček and everything.
Yeah, Dubček was a communist anyway. Mm-hmm. We were betrayed by our president, who was a communist too. At that moment, I actually remember I was screaming. I was gnawing my teeth. I didn't have a weapon. I was hopeless, armless, helpless. And at that moment, I knew that I was willing and capable of killing for the first time in my life, which is bad.
Borek, please, under 30 seconds, how did you end up in the West?
Well, I was just about to either go into a jail or a nut house. I was involved in some anti-government activities. I also drank a lot, so I quit drinking in 1979 for political reasons. Because when I got drunk, I was too noisy. I would attack Soviet officers and communists. I lowered my profile, looked for the right people to bribe, because you couldn't leave the country. It was barbed wire, and watchtowers with machine guns. They shoot people. So it took me about a year to bribe the right people, and then I got out with my wife through Sportsman Union Travel Agency.
Okay.
We succeeded to go to Spain and defected in Spain. Then we lived for half a year in Madrid. That's where I aprendió my español.
Thank you. And boy, when I have a Glazov gang, it looks like I have some very interesting real gangsters on my show. We just have about a minute and a half left. Please, maybe 20 seconds each before we part. Basil, some departing words on when you look back in general, being a leftist and how you feel today.
I don't understand where I was mentally then, but I will tell you something about my openness as a conservative in Hollywood. A few months ago, a couple of years ago, I guess, I was doing a picture, and a lady comes onto the set. She's introduced to me. She's the mother of one of the producers, and she says to me, Basil, she says, I wanted to meet you, and when I found out you were on this movie, I couldn't wait to come here and meet you. I loved your Tea Party speeches on the internet.
Wow.
And being open, conservative in Hollywood has actually helped me to meet a lot of other conservatives because they can come to me.
Exactly.
But they can't come to somebody, and if they don't know, they can't.
And they
can't
feel
make
the
it
courage
known.
to come out.
Yes.
Ari, final thoughts?
The starkest difference is I firmly believe that people of the left are incapable of being happy because part of leftism is ingratitude. And so for my own personal transformation, it brought happiness, calmness. It made life livable because even if you get everything you want as a leftist, you're bringing misery to others and misery to yourself.
Well,
That's
hey,
the
it's
most
interconnected
profound
with
thing
why
for
Lenin
me.
and Khomeini hated music. Borek, please, just a few sentences. We got to go.
Well, in my deepest dreams or nightmares, I wouldn't have imagined that I would have to oppose communism again here in America.
And what a tragic situation we do find ourselves in. We'll be back for our second segment of the Glazov Gang.